Hello and welcome to today's webinar, 4 Ways to Unlock the Strengths of Your Child with ADHD. I'm Laura and our guest today is Dr. Ned Hallowell. Dr. Hallowell is a child and adult psychiatrist, a New York Times best-selling author, the founder of the Hallowell Center for Cognitive and Emotional Health in Boston Metro West, New York City, Seattle, and San Francisco, and of course he's an ADHD expert. Dr. Hallowell, who has ADHD and dyslexia himself, is also the father of 3. And all 3 of his children have ADHD. Dr. Hallowell, welcome.
Oh, it's so nice to be with you.
Just a housekeeping thing before we get started. For all of our viewers, we have a chat box at the right. You can submit your questions in that box, and we will get to your questions at the end of our interview. So with that, Dr. Hallowell, let's dive in. And my first question for you today is, why is it so important to focus on strengths when your child has ADHD?
Well, people, when they get all they hear are these dismal terms: attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and the diagnoser means nothing because they deal with it every day. But for someone who's new to it, it can be devastating, and you come to identify with a disorder, which, to my way of thinking, creates the real disorder, which is shame and fear and believing you're defective and believing you're less than. I think we in the mental health professions unwittingly create what are the real disabilities: shame, fear, low self-esteem, you're believing you're a loser. And so I think it's absolutely critical when you tell someone about their brain, when you tell them about what kind of mind that they have, that you point out the upside. You certainly need to point out the problems as well. But the upside with ADD is what gets overlooked. So I routinely, when I diagnose this in a child, I'll say it's a 10-year-old little boy. I'll say, you're so lucky. You've got a Ferrari engine for a brain. You've got this incredibly powerful brain that's like a Ferrari. Do you know what a Ferrari is? And he'll nod. Yeah, I know what a Ferrari is. And I'll say, but there's one problem. You have bicycle brakes. And he'll say, yeah, I do. And they get it immediately. The race car brain with bicycle brakes really captures in a very short model what this condition is all about. A lot of power, but trouble controlling it. And I say, but don't worry, I'm a brake specialist. And we have lots of ways of strengthening those brakes. And so the kid and his parents leave the office excited. They're in the process of becoming champions. They're not in the process of being a loser, being made less of a loser. And the medical model, unfortunately, so emphasizes the pathology that the strengths often get buried underneath. And that's the big glaring mistake that's made in even the best centers around the country. The emphasis on disorder, deficit disorder, and it's just it's devastating for these kids and their parents to without, and they don't complain because they think well, the expert knows what they're doing, but meanwhile they're sinking inside. They feel like they've just been punched in the gut, and they get a 15-page single-spaced report that lays out in impeccable PhDs all the ways in which a child is defective. And that's why I feel so passionately about a strength-based model. I in no way do I deny there are problems. Absolutely. This condition can be devastatingly difficult to live with, but at the same time, there are always strengths. There are always strengths present, and you want to emphasize those as well.
Well, let's jump into the 4 ways to help parents help their kids unlock their strengths.
Okay.
And the first way is unconditional love. Can you please share what you mean by this?
Yeah, this is something that we should talk about more often. We meaning mental health professionals, but we meaning humans. The Beatles were right. What the world, love is the answer, and the most powerful force for health, goodness, longevity, you name it, anything positive is love. It is at the absolute heart of what makes life good. And where you find love, you find strength, and you find growth, and you find resilience. And where love is missing, you find the opposite. You find vulnerability and failure and brittleness and lack of resilience. And so, it's fortunate that when you become a parent for the first time, and I know you have a 14-month-old, I've got 26, 23, 21 years old. When you become a parent for the first time, God sees to it that, this love just springs forth from within you. I say when you become a parent for the first time, you enter into a permanent state of psychosis. You fall insanely in love with this little baby. You fall in love in a way you never knew you had it in you to do. And what I say to parents is trust that. That wells up within you for a very good reason. It's the best ally you've got. It's the best tool you've got. How to raise children. I say to parents all the time, enjoy your children, love them, spend time with them. When you do that, you're putting money in the bank. You are building a kind of a emotional bank account that will serve them like a protective shield for the rest of their lives. A famous man was once asked how he had achieved so much. He said, "It's because in my mother's eyes I only saw smiles. In my mother's eyes I only saw smiles." And if you can have that smiling face in the back of your mind until the day you die, you're never going to feel alone. And you're going to feel empowered, and you're going to feel strong. And we trivialize love. We say it's Hallmark cards and all that kind of stuff. Well, don't trivialize it. It is the most powerful force for good in life. And when it's missing, it's catastrophic. People scratch their heads and they say, "Oh, all these massacres and shootings, and what's it all about?" Well, it's all about what happens when love is not present. It's all about disconnection. It's all about people who feel marginalized, people who feel scorned, people who feel rejected. Then they can become fanatically dangerous because they are so lacking in love, and so what we need to do in this world is bring in the outliers. We need to bring in the people who feel estranged and alienated and rejected and scorned, and unfortunately, a lot of people with learning differences feel that way. And that's why it's so critical. It's so critical that we embrace them, that we just let them know that it's safe to be who they are. And indeed, that it can be quite spectacular to be who they are. I mean, I could fill this entire building with Nobel Prize winners and Pulitzer Prize winners and self-made millionaires and billionaires, and Academy Award winners, you name it. At the top of any field, creative people, you'll find ADD. And so, but at the same time, the prison population, is also overrepresented ADD. So it's a very important quality to learn how to manage this race car brain with bicycle brakes. And love is really the starting point for strengthening those brakes, for instilling a sense of security and belonging rather than alienation and being an outcast.
There's another way for unlocking your child's strengths that you talk about, which is viewing the mirror traits. And I love this concept. I would love for you to explain it, and we have some examples of those traits as well.
Sure. Well, the medical model lists the disadvantageous aspects of ADD, and well, it should. But you take what Russ Barkley calls the holy trinity of ADD: distractibility, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Turn each one of those on its head, or what I call the mirror trait. Take distractibility. Well, the flip side of that, the mirror trait of that, is curiosity. These folks with ADD tend to be tremendously curious, and curiosity is a lifelong gift. You can't teach it, and these kids are endlessly curious. Impulsivity, oh, this is so bad. He's so impulsive. And well, what is creativity? I ask you, what is creativity? But impulsivity gone right. You don't plan to have a creative idea. You don't say it's 2:00, time for my creative idea, and lay it like an egg. Creative ideas pop. They come unbidden. They're spontaneous. You have to have, a degree of disinhibition week breaks, if you will, in order to have these creative ideas. And then hyperactivity, you get to be my age, I'm 66. It's called energy. I'm really glad I've got this little turbo pack that powers me along day in and day out. And you find these pairs of an advantageous aspect and a disadvantageous aspect over and over again in the world of ADD, which is one of the things that makes it so endlessly interesting.
We have some other examples of some potential mirror traits. One that you've talked about is stubbornness. What's the flip side of stubbornness?
Persistence. And people with ADD tend to be stubborn, and they tend to be persistent. They don't give up easily. But they can also persist in the same failed method over and over again. So it can be self-defeating.
And there's another one, intrusiveness. What would be the flip side of intrusiveness?
You tell me, what's the flip side?
Well, I've heard you talk about this as eagerness, the flip side.
Yes, sure. Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. And we ADDers, we can just barge into a conversation. We're not doing it to be rude. We're just carried away with the enthusiasm. Oh, guess what I did yesterday? And other people roll their eyes. Well, who asked you? Who cares what you did yesterday? But the ADD kid is just so excited, and wants to share it and can forget boundaries. We ADD folks, we don't do well with boundaries. But it's not because we're wanting to intrude or upset people. It's because we tend to be very enthusiastic, very affectionate, very sort of life enthusiasts. We tend to get carried away and excited over. I had a patient today actually say, I loved what he said to me. He was talking about ADD as an amplifier. He said it amplifies everything, and he was talking in reference to his anxiety. And he said, I think anxiety is worse in ADD because ADD amplifies anxiety. I thought it was a very lovely way of putting it. ADD is an amplifier. It amplifies whatever you're feeling.
I like that. I like that a lot. Do you have any, as a person with ADHD, do you have any traits that you flip for yourself?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, my creativity and impulsivity, I've written 20 books and people say, how can you do that if you have ADD and dyslexia? Well, that's the upside, is the creativity. And on the other hand, I can be embarrassingly impulsive at times. I can't tell you how many women I asked to marry me on the first date. And because I just say, well, we're having fun, let's get married. And fortunately, they had better breaks than I did. So it wasn't until I met Sue that she said, all right, yes, let's do it. But I'm a life enthusiast. I'm a sucker. I'm a total pushover. I'm you could sell me the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm just, I believe everyone. I trust everyone. And I've been burned. I've been hurt. I've been betrayed, in fact. But I'd rather be this way than not. I'd rather be this way than very guarded and skeptical and cynical. And so, there's a price to pay for being as trusting as I am, naive, really. And that's pretty common in the world of ADD. I'm very, very generous. In fact, somebody came to my door a few years ago wanting help with ADD. He came to my home. He found me, and I said, okay, come on in. We talked in the living room for a while. And then I said, well, okay, I guess we're done. And he said, well, yeah. And I said, where are you going? He said, well, I was living with my sister, but she threw me out. And I said, oh, so where are you going? He said, well, I really don't have anywhere to go. So I said, well, why don't you stay with us? And he stayed for a year. And it was a wonderful relationship. But that's sort of an ADD move. And unfortunately, my wife also is someone who likes to welcome people and bring people in. And that's what we tend to do. It can be dangerous, to be sure. But on the other hand, it's the way most of us with ADD tend to be.
How can parents start a conversation with their children or their child with ADHD about mirror traits? Do you have any conversation starters or any recommendations?
Well, I think the way to start is the race car brain with bicycle brakes, because I think that kids can really get that. And or just and I think you want to have the conversation early. So you can say you have this thing called ADHD, but it's a terrible term because you should hear it because that's the term that'll be used. But a better describer is race car brain with bicycle brakes, and then you can say sometimes you're impulsive, but you're also creative. Or you can say, you get distracted easily, but that's because you're so curious. And mirror trait may be too sophisticated a term for a little kid to understand, but most kids can understand race car brain with bicycle brakes. And some say, well, how about girls who are not hyperactive? Well, the brain is still race car-y. They may not be, in fact, they usually aren't physically disruptive, but they have tremendously fertile imaginations that are always in motion. I think of Emily Dickinson as sort of the archetypal female with ADD, and I don't know if you're familiar with her poetry, but it's very darting and very lucid and very very concise and very imagistic. And you can just see her mind just constantly whirling and around words and images. And so start early and don't pull your punches. Don't use euphemisms because kids see through that immediately. Just say, you've got some challenges that other people don't have, but you also have some gifts that other people don't have. So let's say you're more sparkly, more energetic, more creative, more intuitive. But on the other hand, it's harder for you to clean up your room than the average kid. It's harder for you to plan and get your studies done on time, than the average kid. In the world of ADD, I'm fond of saying there are really only two times. There's now and not now. So you say, well, we have an exam next Thursday. Not now, and it's just gone. It's not that the kid doesn't want to get ready for the test. It's not in their neuronal circuitry to have sort of that grid that goes up to plan a study schedule. And the more open you can be with your children about this, see, when you're open, you're implying no big deal. You're implying, whatever it is, we'll handle it. When you're secretive or use euphemisms, you're implying, the truth is too tough to handle. The truth is too tough to go to. And that's a very bad message because that's where shame and stigma originate, is in secrecy and fear. This is nothing to be afraid of if you take care of it. If you don't take care of it, it can certainly be dangerous to have this kind of mind.
There's another way to unlock your child's strengths, and you call this the cycle of excellence.
Yes.
So you could take us through the cycle of excellence.
In my book, The Childhood Roots of Adult Happiness, it's a book I wrote some years ago when I was in the midst of my three kids' early childhood. And there's 5 steps. The first step is to connect, and that's by far the most important. Connection is this feeling of being a part of something larger than yourself and creating a connected childhood. And by that, I don't mean access to the internet. I mean, connection to parents, to siblings, to neighborhood, to friends, to nature, to some spiritual practice, connection to activities, favorite activities, connection to the past. All, if you think of life in terms of connection, that's what you want childhood to be, a richly connected childhood. And then the connected child naturally moves to the second step, which is to play. And by play, I mean any activity that engages the imagination. Any activity that engages the imagination, by my definition, is play. The easiest way to initiate play is to ask an open-ended question. Where does a circle begin and end? How high is the sky? Why did my brother have to get born? Open-ended questions. Kids, immediately their imagination kicks in and they start wondering, and wondering should be a prime activity of childhood. But as you find something you like to play at, you do it over and over again. Well, that's step 3, practice. And as you practice, you make progress. Well, that's step 4, making progress, gaining some measure of mastery. And then as you make progress, you receive recognition. Somebody you care about notices and says, good job, your hard work is paying off. And that feels really good, but that also then connects you to the people recognizing you, thus completing the cycle. So those 5 steps, connect, play, practice, make progress, gain recognition, is what I call the cycle of excellence. And if you raise a child in that cycle, you will generate the qualities that really do predict having a wonderful life. Having a wonderful life is not dependent on top scores, Ivy League colleges, and trophies and prizes. It's dependent on attitudes. And good news, every single child can develop the attitudes that predict a wonderful life. What are they? Confidence, self-esteem, grit, the ability to bounce back, optimism, the ability to find solutions even when there don't seem to be any, the ability to get along with others, the ability to initiate tasks and follow them through to completion. Well, those are attitudes. Those are attitudes that everyone can develop, and the cycle of excellence generates them quite naturally.
The fourth way we have here is creating a richly connected childhood, which you touched on in the cycle of excellence. But could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. As soon as I have a glass of water here.
No problem.
Connection, you see, it really is the key to life. It's the key to pretty much everything good. And disconnection drives most of what's bad. The beauty of connection, which I call connection the other vitamin C, the beauty of connection is that it's free and it's infinite in supply. What's sad is that people don't take it seriously enough. They're pursuing worshiping golden calves. They're worshiping false idols, like elite college admissions or prizes and whatnot. Those are fine, but that's not what life is really worth living for. Connection, that feeling that you're a part of something larger than yourself, that's a tremendously valuable feeling. It is so protective. And if you can instill that in your kids as they're growing up, and you do it simply by connecting, having family dinner, reading aloud at bedtime, going for walks in the park, telling stories, listening to stories from grandma, connection to the past, connection to nature, connection to favorite activities. The reason you want to expose your kid to as many activities as possible is not to bolster his resume, but to find out what he's got talents for, where his interests lie. Where does her brain light up? And the only way you'll find that out is by trying different things. You told me you played basketball. You probably started that at an early age, and it became a passion for you. And my son, the youngest son, Tucker, is a soccer player at Trinity College and loves it. And he started that at an early age. And we don't do it so he can put it on his resume. We do it because doing something that's challenging that you love to do is really rewarding, and it's how people contribute to the world. So at its best, work is simply some form of play that someone's willing to pay you for. You want to begin early on with kids feeling and experiencing the joy in connecting, and then the so-called work ethic follows naturally, because if you find something you really love to do, you want to work at it hard, not because it's the right thing to do, but because you want to get better. You want to go to the weight room. You want to practice your scales. You want to revise what you're writing, whatever it might happen to be, because you're into it, as the saying goes. You're into it, and it feels good. And guess what? You make progress, and you grow. But it all starts with connection. It all starts with connection. And if only people would take that seriously, particularly for people with learning differences, it's so sad to see them feeling so disconnected and saying, I wish I had a different brain, or I wish I wasn't born, and these kinds of heartbreaking statements that these kids can make when they feel disconnected. The solution is at hand. The solution of connection is at hand, and it needs to be applied at school, at home, and then as you get older in the workplace. Understood is such a wonderful organization for providing not only information but connection to parents with kids who learn differently. Understood is just an incredible organization doing God's work. I mean, I'm just so impressed with what you all do and how you serve so many people.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And I actually have some great comments for you from some of our viewers here that
Okay.
I would love to share with you. And I'd love to jump into the Q&A portion of this webinar because we have a lot of people who want to hear from you.
Okay.
So I just wanted to start with this from Iri Nikita. I think that's how you say that. And I'm going to look down while I read her comment just for a moment.
Okay.
And it's, good afternoon, Dr. Hallowell. Over the weekend, my husband and I found you in your book, Superparenting for ADD. We finally feel like we found hope. My daughter being diagnosed a year ago, age 8, we encountered nothing but negativity in our area. We tried very hard to maintain positive ways to communicate and give her plenty of love, but the negativity with some professionals seems to have had an impact. So I just wanted to share this person's wonderful reaction to your book and to your approach, and maybe you have some tips for her. I believe it's a woman, for how to deal with that negativity.
Thank you for the comment. And unfortunately, the medical profession and the mental health profession, without meaning to, creates an awful lot of problems by the negative energy they put out. Yes, ADD can be crippling, but the way to help someone is not to tell them chapter and verse of all the ways that they can be crippled. But also to tell them the ways in which they can thrive, the ways in which they can soar, and that's the fact. That's not a fairy tale. As I said, I could name you incredibly successful people. The current CEO of AOL, for example, Tim Armstrong, is very open about having attention deficit disorder, and he and his wife are working to help reduce stigma and educate the public, just as Understood is doing it. We need to pump positive energy into this story, not to tell fairy tales at all, but to tell true stories of people living with these conditions and excelling in life, not merely getting by.
We have another question. This is from a viewer whose name is Sarah. And Sarah asks, what do you recommend for a 13-year-old who doesn't have self-worth? He rejects recognition.
The best way to develop confidence and self-esteem is to make progress at some task that matters to you and is challenging. Have to have those two variables. Got to matter to you and got to be challenging. Could be baking a cake, could be building a model airplane. Anything. You just need to find some task that's challenging, that matters to him, and his self-esteem will grow if he makes progress at it. Now, if he makes no progress, the opposite happens, and that's why you need coaches and teachers and parents to help kids who are trying valiantly but not making any progress, because that's a self-esteem breaker. But find some activity, some task that is both challenging and matters to the child, and see to it that he makes or she makes progress at it, and self-esteem will absolutely grow.
Great, thank you. Another question here, this is from an anonymous viewer. This person is asking, my 16-year-old son can't get started on anything, especially homework. So he just doesn't do it. I don't know how to help him get started. He can't just sit down and start the work. Any tips for this parent?
Yes, sit down with him and start it for him. People with ADD there's a term from chemistry called energy of activation, and it's how much energy does it take to get the equation, to get the chemical reaction going. Once you get it going, it takes over spontaneously. But folks with ADD, there's a lot of energy of activation that's needed. It's overcoming inertia. For everyone, there's some of that, but ADD, it's particularly onerous. So I say sit down with him at the kitchen table, wherever you are, and write the first sentence of the essay for him, or do the first math problem, or read the first paragraph of the history book, whatever it might happen to be. Literally do it for him, and then invite him to join, and then he'll get going. It's like priming the pump. Now, nobody has pumps, so they don't know what that means. But in the old days, when there were pumps, you have to pour a little water down the pump and pump it to get the water coming up from the well. It was called priming the pump. Well, this is my analogy for helping someone with ADD to get started. You have to prime their pump, and when you do that, then they can jump into it. But otherwise, they'll keep putting it off, and we ADDers are notorious procrastinators.
We have another question. It's more of a comment from a viewer named CPP15, and I was wondering. So this person is asking or saying that we're just so overwhelmed with the things that are getting broken, the talk back, the off-the-charts strong will, and it sounds like this person is just exhausted based on the rest of that comment. And I'm wondering, what kind of feedback do you have for this parent about coping with children with ADHD who are, showing these traits that may be, less than desirable? How can this person flip this?
Yeah, get help. It's very hard to do it alone. And even if you have two parents, you often end up fighting with each other, blaming each other. So get outside help, be it a therapist, coach, a community organization, a club, a team, a band. You need outside help. It's very hard to do it alone. So get help is really the key bit of advice there.
Do you have a recommendation for the first place to go? We have some viewers are chiming in and asking about where to go and get help, knowing that resources are sometimes, financial resources can be difficult. Where would be their first stop?
If you know another parent who has a child who has ADD, ask them where they've gone. You can certainly start with your pediatrician. Certainly start with your school. Schools typically have resources that are not terribly expensive. It may indeed be at the school that you'll get the help you need. A lot of schools have very sophisticated support programs for these kids. Groups, it doesn't even have to be group therapy, just martial arts can be really helpful with these kids. Being on a team is sort of a built-in group therapy. So join a basketball team or a soccer team or what have you, or sing in the choir, or, any kind of group activity. You don't have to pay for it, but any kind of group activity is therapeutic. Being in a group of any kind is therapeutic, unless it's a gang or something like that. But that's where a lot of these kids turn, because they're looking for connection, and that's what gangs are all about. Gangs provide connection, not a very positive kind of connection, but it's answering that need. And so if you don't find connection in a healthy way, you often find it in an unhealthy way. And Understood, my goodness, here we are on the Understood webinar. Go to Understood. Understood is just full of resources. And I mean, my goodness, how could I not mention that first? Go to this website, understood.org, and you just overflowing with resources. I mean, you'll wear yourself out before you get to the end of all the resources that Understood has. There's just so many. Obviously, I would recommend my books as well, but Understood has everything you could possibly want.
Well, thank you so much. You actually stole the words out of my mouth in a way. I wanted to mention that, of course, if you are feeling like you need help, please seek out help. But we also have a really rich online community on Understood where you can connect with other parents of kids with ADHD and get tips from them. They are ready to and willing to help you out. So,
absolutely, yeah, no, it's an incredible community that you've built, and that's the answer to the world's problems. By the way, it's not just problems of learning differences, but we live in a world suffering from an epidemic of disconnection. And we really need, and a lot of it is driven by these electronic devices, as wonderful as they are. You can spend an awful lot of time doing what I call screen sucking, just, mindlessly in front of a screen instead of connecting with people. I urge people to do little things like make eye contact in the supermarket. I play a little game. I'll be wheeling my cart down. Someone walks past me. I try to get eye contact and a smile. And some people will do it. It's like we're part of a secret society. But most people won't. They look the other way, and it's just too much mistrust out there. I've started a podcast, I should mention, called Distraction. And in the podcast, I say, this is about a world. We live in the age of distraction, and the solution to distraction is connection. So the podcast is about we have all these wonderfully interesting guests, and it's only been going for a couple of months, but I urge you to go to iTunes and download the podcast Distraction. It's free, of course, and we put out a new episode every week, and I've had so much fun doing it. It's some of the most amazing guests, and then I do some riffs just on my own. It's fun. The world of podcasts is fun.
Wonderful. I can't wait to check it out. I have a few more questions from some viewers here.
Yes.
And we have one from, it looks like GPB. The question says, my stepson is very smart, but he learns differently, so he feels stupid. What can I do to convince him that he is indeed not stupid and have him believe me?
Well, obviously tell him, but then you've got to get him to prove it to himself. And so once again, set him up to do something that's challenging that he can make progress at, and he'll see that he's smart. And also explain to him, smart is a cudgel. It doesn't really mean anything. It's too broad of a term. The question you need to ask is smart at what? And everyone is smart at something. You're smart at basketball, for example. And I'm smart at writing. I'm really stupid at basketball. So if you can sort of demystify this word smart, particularly in schools, it's a terribly dangerous concept because people, just they don't get it, and then no one is as smart as they want to be, and then they feel bad about it. And I just like to get rid of I wrote a little children's story, and the end of it with the refrain was, no brain is the same, no brain is the best, each brain finds its own special way. And so tell your stepson, what he wants to do is find his own brain's special way. How do you solve problems naturally? What do you like to do naturally? And just get rid of this bogus concept of smart. Everyone's smart at something. You just need to find out at what. And that's what makes life interesting and fun. And childhood and adulthood, for that matter, should be a time of exploration. Like I'm learning how to get smart at podcasting, and I started off stupid at it, and now I'm getting smarter at it. So trying on something new, is always invigorating. And but you have to be bold. See, I often say the one true learning disability is fear. That's what we need to. And that's why we need each other. I love to tell the story of my first grade teacher who I couldn't read, and she didn't excuse me from reading. She just put her arm around me. And having that arm around me when it come to be my turn and I'd demonstrate that I couldn't read, I didn't feel afraid or ashamed because she had her arm around me. Mrs. Eldridge's arm is the story I tell. And that arm has stayed around me ever since. If it hadn't been for that arm, I would have avoided reading. Instead, I ended up majoring in English at Harvard College and graduating with high honors. I remain a very slow reader. That's what dyslexia is all about. But I also had a talent with words, and that never would have come out had it not been for that arm taking fear out of the equation. You really want to... I remember after 9/11, I was asked to go on some TV shows and give advice to parents. I asked my daughter, Lucy, who was 13 at the time. I'll never forget what she said to me. I said, Lucy, what should I tell parents in the wake of 9/11? And she said, Daddy, tell people not to hold back on life out of fear. That was such great advice. Don't hold back on life out of fear. And if you can say that to your kids, it's failing is fine. Failing is necessary. Another one of my friends says, no is the first step on the way to yes. You have to fall off the bike to learn how to ride the bike. So you just want to stay engaged, stay in the game, and you'll get there. You'll get there. And if you feel hopeless, well, another one of my favorite mottos: never worry alone. Talk to somebody. Somebody else will buck you up. Somebody else will give you hope. Sometimes it's hard to do that by yourself. So never worry alone. Go to understood.org and you'll find a wonderful venue to worry with people. And next thing you know, you're not worrying, you're solving problems. Worry is the beginning of problem solving if you share it with somebody. The key to life, I'm telling you, is connection. It really is the key to pretty much everything good. And isolation is the reason for so much of the bad stuff that happens.
Well, speaking of connection, we have another question that came in from an anonymous viewer. And this person says, thank you for all of your work in this area. What's your suggestion for communicating with teachers about ADHD?
Well, first of all, do it. And that's don't avoid it. And remember, teachers they don't like you to come in with a list of demands, this sort of thing. So come in respectfully, as of course you would, and say, you know, my son or daughter has ADHD, and what plan do you have, or how can we work together? How can I support at home what you're doing in the classroom? Make friends with the teacher. That is really the first bit of advice before you come in talking about ADHD. Get to know that teacher as a human being. Teachers are beleaguered. They're overworked and underpaid. You know, so if you come in and first words out of your mouth are about some service your child needs, they might push back. But if the first words out of your mouth are, you know, thank you for teaching my son, I'd like to get to know you a little bit. Maybe if you bring some brownies with you or something. Just something, a token of respect and, you know, natural curiosity about who are you? Who am I entrusting my child to for this year? And not just what degrees or qualifications, but do you have a family of your own? Do you have a dog? What's your favorite meal? You know, and then add in, how can I help? Could I do your copying for you, or, you know, how can I help? And then once you've made that relationship, it's so much easier to talk about your child's special needs, whatever they might happen to be. So advice number one is make friends with the teacher.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you so much for answering our users' questions. Unfortunately, we aren't going to be able to get to the rest of the questions. However, I have some good news, which is that the people whose questions were not answered, you can direct them in one of two places. You can go to our community at u.org/community and post your questions there. We are constantly checking and answering questions and running our questions through experts. And also, Dr. Hallowell, you will be on Twitter tomorrow with us at noon Eastern Time.
Oh, I'll be in New York tomorrow. Okay. I didn't know I was doing that. That's great.
Well, you have a Twitter chat tomorrow on ADHD and stigma, and
good.
he will be able to answer questions during the Twitter chat tomorrow as well.
Great.
And Dr. Hallowell, your website is drhallowell.com. Is that correct?
drhallowell.com. And don't forget my podcast. To download Distraction, go to iTunes and or go to the website, which is connect@distractionpodcast.com.
Wonderful. Well, it's really been a pleasure, and I really appreciate your coming on our webinar today, and I'm sure that our viewers have really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and I'm such a fan of Understood. You guys are awesome.
And we're a huge fan of yours, so thank you so much. I hope you have a
Take
great
care.
night. Thank you.